Okay, so now Cyrus Peñarroyo is a partner of Extents and an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. Before starting his own practice, he worked at Louis R. Mackey Lewis and OMA and earned his MArch at Princeton School of Architecture. Cyrus's portfolio stood out immediately for its radical rethinking of the tools of the discipline. In his own words, Cyrus explores, quote, the effects of contemporary media and digital culture on architecture, in particular how the circulation of images and the means behind their construction are reshaping the built environment. To do so, he produces viscerally evocative alternative worlds. The drawings and environments that Cyrus creates are entirely immersive in both their sensory affect and their destabilizing conceptions of bodies, subjects, and social interactions. The radicality of Cyrus's work is not only in its vivid world-making, but in its implication that these mediated worlds are already intertwined with our present.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Bryony, for the introduction. I'm going to bookend my talk with a few thank yous. First, thank you also to the Architectural League of New York, to Anne, Katerina, Sarah, and others for organizing this entire event, and to the committee and jury for selecting me as one of this year's winners. Also, thank you to the team at Parsons for their help with the exhibition. Thank you to my friends and colleagues at Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning for their continued support. And to my partner in practice, McLean Clutter. Only 2 years out from League Prize eligibility, I share this work and prize with you. It's a pleasure getting to work with you every day. And more importantly, thanks for being an incredible friend. Together, we run an architecture practice called Extents. Extents is a design collaborative that operates across scales and disciplinary silos. We're interested in architecture, urbanism, media, digital culture, and other instruments of life that can be impacted by design. Central to our practice is a commitment to architecture's role as a medium of public life, progressive culture, and common sense. And we deploy aesthetic devices and queer methods as a means of access to otherness. Our work cultivates alteric forms of collectivity, new forms of excess, unconventional tectonic assemblies that suggest alternative material cultures, and other ways of being in the world. As a practice, we're much more interested in unpacking the concerns around individual projects than committing to any singular capital P project or signature design technique. This means that we take on each design project through its own terms. We privilege the development of an orientation over ideology, unpacking physical and cultural contexts, and leveraging the latent opportunities or constraints that each project presents. This also means that we're commonly operating at the edge of what we know how to do. Individual projects require that we constantly take on new skills, softwares, design techniques, or collaborators. To that end, we've set up the practice as a sort of open relationship. The two of us are involved in everything we do to different degrees, but we value and seek out collaboration with other architects, designers, public partners, nonprofits, students, and academics that bring expertise and perspectives necessary for individual works, and to expand the breadth and depth of the practice. This kind of open or ecological model for the practice means that concerns or affinities that span from project to project sometimes only become clear in retrospect, when looking back at what we've been doing and thinking over the past couple of years. The practice only started in 2017. So, to frame this talk today, I looked back to pull out a few preoccupations that I think articulate a set of threads within our recent work. And those are media materiality, other urbanisms, digital culture, and critical engagement. We think that media and architecture are alike in their ability to frame collective experience. By focusing on the materiality of media, the physical stuff of media that constantly surrounds us, we seek to articulate this commonality and develop novel forms of occupation, ornamentation, and collective experience. Like media, we see urbanism as a technology for collective life. We're interested in urbanism as both product, in the form of speculative urban design proposals, and as a context that confronts architecture with all of the social and political concerns that attend the urban milieu. This interest in social and political contexts also extends to the digital sphere, as more and more of our lives are conducted online and in digital space. Our projects are often intended to anticipate their dissemination online or in social media, taking on the digital as a site for critical contextualism. And so, whether the site is digital or IRL, if that distinction even stands anymore, we hope our work prompts the questioning of occupation, interaction, material cultures, and all of the ways the built environment impacts those concerns. I thought I would begin by really quickly showing previews of several recent projects, just to give you a sense of the scope of our practice and how the concerns I just discussed move through our work. And all of these projects are featured in more detail on our website. So first up, Shaped Places speculates on the reciprocity between who we are and the shape of where we live, between identities and the built environments that support them. The project culminates in 3 linear cities that propose ways that urbanization might be a tool to unite politically divided publics into one functional body politic. And the exhibition featured paintings, drawings, and models that were exhibited for the first time at Pink Comma Gallery in Boston. Next up is Assembly Lines, a proposal for a community space in Detroit that was meant to redirect the image of Detroit's industrial legacy towards the creative assembly of community infrastructure, grassroots publics, and counterpublics. The project is composed of a suite of graphic spatial parts that can be moved around along a continuous linear track above to host a range of singular or collective occupancies, from co-working to community design meetings. Other Island is a project that draws on a legacy spanning from Thomas More's Utopia to Koolhaas's New Welfare Island, in which urban islands are a site for speculation, for alteric reprojections of received urban reality. In this case, the island is a mobile geologic object that would travel between world cities. The cladding is chromed and geometrically faceted in order to literally reflect a kind of mixed or distorted image of any city within its proximity back to the urban onlooker, soliciting speculation on other urbanisms. I explored similar material questions in a proposal for the 2018 Ragdale Ring competition. Reflections on the Lawn engages the yard as a rich cultural field, transforming turf into a theatrical landscape. The lawn in this proposal is a place for playing out myths and fantasies, a disciplined sward where everyone's imaginations can run wild. Nude is a proposal for MoMA's Young Architects program that I did with Staka Studio. This project draws a critical line between contemporary digital presence and the fundamental surface of human appearances, questioning how we are seen and all of the myriad ways that technology allows us to appear in a scene by staging what we refer to as a critical party that blurs the distinction between occupant and scenography. Nude is composed of various parts that approximate different kinds of skin, and an augmented reality application that would have allowed users to sample images of their own skin throughout the installation. The resultant environment was meant to eschew conventional pieties around identity, sex and sexiness, collectivity, and body politics. The Thrill of Threshold, or Circle Jerk, was a pavilion that questions the disciplinary significance of pavilions and their capacity for public engagement. In a way, the project is about the pointlessness of the pavilion, a call for the discipline to exit our echo chamber at a time of pressing social, ecological, and political concerns. Despite that, we still design pavilions. This pavilion was called Turn On, Tune In, a pavilion that illuminates our collective desensitization to media by repurposing the material stuff of media technology. In this case, we imagined scraping off and reusing the polarizing film from old, discarded LCD screens, and we were interested in the optical effects that could be created by layering and rotating individual pieces of film to bend light in multiple ways. And lastly, the materiality of the screen was similarly used in this exhibition design for last year's Becoming Digital conference at Taubman College. Screens provide the material support for ruminations about data, authorship, identity, audience, and labor, prompting visitors to take a critical look at the technologies organizing their lives. So, to expand on some of these ideas, I'll now discuss 3 projects in more detail. The first is Image Matters, a project that looks closely at the material implications of image making. Images are everywhere in contemporary culture. We constantly stare at screens composing images from thousands of illuminated pixels. Images circulate as data through fiber optic cable. Terabytes of images are stored in silicon in our devices and servers. We hold mental images in our brains, and our world is still, and increasingly, packed with images in the form of a range of photographic formats. Images constitute an increasing proportion of the stuff of everyday reality, and yet the matter of images remains underexplored. Our work engages a wide spectrum of theorists, designers, and practitioners from the arts, humanities, and sciences in order to investigate the materiality of images and their role in framing collective experience and the built environment. To do this, the project recovers the materially rich early photographic processes of the tintype. Now, many of you probably know what a tintype is, but for those who don't, it's an early photographic process that's very labor-intensive and entails the use of metallic substrates to host layers of chemical and physical reactions, eventually producing a direct positive photographic image. The resulting prints, some of which you can see here, these are ours at the bottom, have unique visual qualities. To contemporary audiences, they might appear strangely familiar, unmistakably photographic, and yet sufficiently distinct from the types of images most commonly circulated today to interrupt habitual consumption. And when I say that they're unmistakably photographic, I mean that they certainly constitute resemblances or similitude, but at the same time, they have visual qualities that are uniquely inherent to the photograph as a category of object. Tintypes have texture, depth, and thickness that give them heightened material presence, vastly exceeding that of the typical 5x7 snapshot or the ephemeral digital pic. So, we see tintypes as image objects that evince familiar photographic effects while stubbornly refusing to cede their object quality to the realm of mere appearances. Our tintypes have been produced within an enormous occupiable camera named the conditions room, a fully functional sliding box camera with a lens and an operable focal length that was also designed to serve as a darkroom for the development of the images it captures and to open up to become a gallery space for the exhibition. The conditions room is itself a study of the material and spatial consequences of image making, engaging a long history of optical devices that render the process of image making materially and spatially palpable. It's built from dimensional lumber and clad in closed-cell neoprene foam paneling. Particular attention was paid to the design and fabrication of the paneling details, which are purposefully over-articulated. They include a lot of double folds and redundancy to elevate the functional necessity of maintaining the light qualities required for our imaging process to the level of architectural expression. They're a sort of ornament, let's say. Aluminum reproductions of these details serve as the substrates for the final products of the first phase of this project. These substrates have been photosensitized through the tintype process, producing three-dimensional pieces displaying photographic impressions of digitally manipulated material textures. We're really interested in the relationships that emerged between the digital patterns we produced, which are seen on the left in black and white, and the material consequences of the tintype process. Sometimes both produced inconsistencies, blurs, or noise that appear surprisingly congruent, while at other times the slick and seamless digital is in stark contrast to the physical and material constraints of our imaging process. In one sense, the prints are unmistakably photographic and familiar. In this way, the pieces are Instagram-ready, designed to insert themselves within the deluge of image circulation that sets the tempo of contemporary architectural production. But in another sense, our pieces are meant to resist habitual consumption. They confuse the flat and the thick, the 2D and the 3D, the digital and the archaic, all in order to check, disrupt, redirect, or slow down image circulation to secure moments of rare attention. And now I'll end with just a few shots of the conditions room, opened up to serve as the exhibition space for collectively viewing these image objects. So, from images to internet, this next project explores the ubiquity and all-overness of another facet of contemporary media. Online on Site is a mapping-based research and design project that studies the digital divide in Detroit, proposing urban design scenarios that are rich with innovative ways to connect physically and virtually. And this research was prompted by two recent developments: the FCC's repeal of net neutrality and the Census Bureau's decision to move their data collection online for the 2020 survey. In both cases, for one to be counted, or let's say to exist, requires access to digital technology, which is a problem for those unable to afford internet, computers, or smart devices. Detroit is one of many places in the United States where this digital inequity persists. As investors pour money into the residential and commercial development of areas like downtown and midtown, residents in marginalized neighborhoods lack access to digital infrastructure. Indeed, despite recent development, Detroit has the lowest rate of internet connectivity in the United States, excluding thousands of people from the opportunities for education, employment, and belonging afforded to those with the ability to get online, and exacerbating the economic precarity of many Detroiters. Referred to as digital redlining, some view disinvestment in digital infrastructure for less affluent, non-white communities as commensurate to discrimination. Many of those affected are school-aged kids that need the internet to complete their homework, submit job applications, or simply socialize with their classmates. Various political and grassroots organizations, like Detroit's Equitable Internet Initiative, seen here, are working to build a robust digital ecosystem as urban development is increasingly influenced by broadband or wireless accessibility. To do this, the EII is establishing community mesh networks across the city. But what exactly is a mesh network? Well, typically, we access the internet via broadband, an enormous cable that connects our ISP, or internet service provider, with top-level internet exchanges. And that diagram is there on the left. Mesh networks, on the other hand, connect devices directly to each other instead of going through a central point, which allows for more flexibility based on available bandwidth and storage. Since mesh networks are decentralized and non-hierarchical, the only way to shut down or disrupt a mesh is to turn off every node in the network, making them more resilient to interference. The nodes, referred to as community anchor sites, include schools, libraries, municipal buildings, and other stakeholders in the neighborhood with the resources, access to fiber, and willingness to form public-private partnerships. In a community-driven network architecture, factories, apartments, and houses are outfitted with different routers, turning buildings into access points for residents to get online. The placement of the routers is based on line of sight, seen here in the kind of hatched zone. For the network to function, airspace has to be clear of obstructions, including trees and signage. Taller buildings can act as long-span nodes to link different areas of the neighborhood, while shorter buildings can distribute Wi-Fi access to more locally can distribute Wi-Fi access more locally and allow people to connect with their phones, laptops, or tablets. In other words, mesh networks are highly attuned to the physical attributes of the urban environment. Heights, proximities, and materials play a pivotal role in the network success. So I began the project by mapping Detroit. First, charting fiber availability to show its consolidation in the downtown area, potential community anchors like public libraries, religious institutions, schools, and Wi-Fi equipped eateries that could participate in a community mesh network, the number of internet service providers available to residents. Most of the city has 3 or less options, and maximum download speed, which is remarkably slow. All of this data was examined in relation to the city's history of redlining, race distribution, median household income, unemployment rate, and youth population. After reviewing this data, 3 sites were chosen for design speculation, each revealing a different opportunity for a community-driven network architecture to exist. Each site is anchored by a public library, noted on the maps with a pink plus, and the first site, seen here, is located in southwest Detroit and features religious institutions and locally owned businesses that together could form a possible mesh network. In my interviews with local high school students, I learned that many of them are actually advised to go to McDonald's for the 24-hour Wi-Fi access when they don't have internet at home, which is pretty outrageous. So this first site speculation reimagines McDonald's as a community anchor site. And this diagram shows line of sight for ideal connectivity with other nodes in this possible network. So an existing McDonald's is converted into what I refer to as the McNet Learning Center, an educational space that provides computers, tutoring services, and workstations to students. An abandoned home just north of the site is replaced with communal townhouses oriented towards the restaurant, with shared outdoor spaces that transition from the commercial thoroughfare to the residential block. An urban farm is introduced to an adjacent lot, so the surrounding neighborhood and the restaurant have access to produce, a direct response to the McDonald's Corporation's recent attempts to offer healthier menu options and be more community-centered. And here's a view inside of the addition showing study areas that face a new school bus drop-off. The second site is located in northeast Detroit and is bisected by a major highway and next to a defunct golf course. And this same diagram shows line of sight from the public library and the abundance of trees in the area. Again, trees interfere with signal strength. So the neighborhood, which has a significant amount of vacant land and housing, which if this is what it would look like if you were to just clear out all of the vacant property. The neighborhood is re-envisioned as a network defined by social and cultural programs. Unoccupied houses and industrial buildings are converted into religious institutions. Community centers, banks, and businesses are redistributed into residential blocks, and new housing types are developed with shared space and internet access in mind. As trees are cleared to maintain sightlines and reduce Wi-Fi interference, the defunct golf course is transformed into an urban forest. So all of those trees kind of make their way over to the golf course. Here's a view of one of the new housing types, a ring of duplexes with shared porches that feed off Wi-Fi from a central antenna. The third and final site is located in northwest Detroit along Grand River Avenue, a commercial thoroughfare lined with hair salons, markets, convenience stores, and automotive shops. Between three major anchor sites, seen here, in the neighborhood's potential mesh network, I chose 2 blocks to develop as a community land trust where property lines are dissolved in favor of shared Wi-Fi and resources. So vacant buildings, shown in dark blue, are converted into computer-equipped daycares, greenhouses, and barbershops owned and managed by residents living in the area. The wing of an existing church is transformed into a tech hub where both seniors and youth can get online, and an adjacent community center will supply internet access to the blocks in addition to a nearby closed school that's sitting on dark fiber that can be reactivated. Cords and cables are consolidated into fiber optic berms that cut through the site, creating civic spaces for residents to gather in various ways. And here's a view of one of those berms that kind of cuts through next to the urban farm. All of the maps and proposals were compiled into videos that also featured my interviews with Detroit youth. These students shared how the internet influences their identities, daily routines, and expectations of the city. I also met with representatives from the Detroit Community Technology Project and the City of Detroit Mayor's Office, and used what I learned from those conversations to develop the design proposals. The videos were presented in an exhibition alongside other projects mapping Detroit, and here, data points are literally materialized as what I refer to as content nodes within the gallery for visitors to engage. As the project is received by Detroiters, I hope it will create a heightened sense of community, empower citizens to create new spaces for public discourse in their neighborhoods, and redefine what digital access and equity could look like in the urban environment. The last project I'll talk about is Lossy Lossless, a temporary environment for materials and applications in Los Angeles. When M&A approached us about this project, it was explained that we would be the soft opening of a new space in Echo Park, which is a short drive from their old courtyard space in Silver Lake, seen here, and that our installation would be programmed with various community and organization activities throughout its duration. So, we began by thinking about the urban context. It was interesting to us that this new space on Sunset Boulevard is located in a rapidly gentrifying part of Echo Park. And here's the building and the storefront space in the lower right. We thought that this context posed a problematic that is familiar and recurrent for a nonprofit arts organization, especially one dedicated to community engagement through public programming. So often, the presence of cultural and arts organizations are harbingers or even catalysts of gentrification, even while their missions might be focused on community and public benefit. So we thought of this project as an opportunity to make a space for discussion around this complex issue. We wondered, who constitutes the public in such a rapidly changing neighborhood? Can newcomer and longtime residents coexist? How are the politics of development impacting the existing community? And how can an arts organization address its role within such development? So again, this project sought to provide a forum for discussion on these questions and not to provide answers or verdicts. To do this, we wanted the storefront to feel like an extension of the street, and a space that is meant to be viewed from the passerby, like a diorama, as much as it is meant to be occupied. So we began with a kind of Google Street View analysis, moving up and down Sunset to gather what we saw as markers of the boulevard's past and future. Fading remnants, like the stacked tires around the flat fix next door, and abandoned phone booths, as well as markers of change, like the folding chalkboard placards outside of bougie cafes, ATMs, and bike lane signs, which are outlined here. So these elements were digitally modeled and recombined in the wall covering that lines the space. We call this wall covering the tableau. In the tableau, some elements appear ghostly and translucent, like they are in the act of disappearance. Elsewhere, pieces of the tableau are purposefully pixelated, which we thought of as a trace of digital loss. The tableau is printed on a reflective material so that as one looks through the storefront, the street life is reflected amidst the tableau elements, blurring the inside and outside and figuring the present public into a condensed image of the boulevard. Filling the rest of the space is a floorscape that can be reconfigured and occupied in different ways for different events. The floorscape is assembled from an off-the-shelf data center floor system and covered with custom-made high-density foam padding. So, clearly, this aligns with our interest in the materiality of media or the materiality of the digital world, but this particular use of the data center floor system also had more project-specific motivation. We think the flooring system has an infrastructural quality that rhymes with sunset and the surrounding urban context. And by using a system composed of clearly defined tectonic elements, the object quality of the floor elements are meant to prompt comparative relationships with the objects depicted in the tableau. Combined with the traffic cones, foam tiles, and furniture pieces, we hoped for a reading of objects spilling out from the tableau onto the sidewalk while the tableau collects objects from the street. And so these are some shots of the install. It's a really small space, about 12 feet by 12 feet by 9 feet tall. And here's a view of the tableau, kind of mirrored surface. We also milled these kind of cylindrical seats that could be moved around the space. We also commissioned a local neon manufacturer to fabricate some lights, some fixtures for the environment. And we really love this image because you get the reflection of the street on the glass, and you get the blurrier reflection of the street onto the kind of mirrored tableau, and that those reflections start to collapse and sort of kind of play with one another. Shot of the interior. And the different ways that the data floor system can be occupied. And then just to kind of note here the tectonic articulation that expresses the componentry, and it sort of makes the parts into objects. And like the foam was milled to accept the data floor system, and it's almost as if these pieces are kind of coming together in kind of new ways. And then here are some shots from the opening, as well as the space saturated in green with the overhead lights off. And we also anticipated that the project would have an extended life online through social media. The space is in a constant state of flux, so each image presents a different combination of environmental conditions and body relationships. So I think I've reached the end of my time. Just to reiterate a point that I made at the beginning of this talk, our practice is extensive, not exclusive. What I presented tonight articulates one set of threads through our recent work, but I hope you'll go into the gallery or to our website to have a closer look. I'll end by thanking our past and present collaborators, in particular Liz Feltz, John Buick, and the amazing Reed Miller for their contributions to the exhibition and the gallery. Thanks for your attention and for allowing me this time to share a bit of me with you. Thanks.